when I see statements issuing from the villa, not in particular from Tinubu himself, from President Tinubu himself, but from his underlings, that this matter should be resolved by the courts, it gets me thinking, is someone somewhere contriving some predetermined results from the courts? What is informing this blind confidence about the matter of Nnamdi Kanu should be resolved by the courts? It begins to sound to me like someone who stole your election, and before you open your mouth, INEC tells you go to court, like a mantra. It's suspicious. Why wasn't Igbo's case resolved in the courts? Why wasn't the chairman of Miet Allah's case resolved by the courts? Why wasn't Shore's case resolved by the courts? Why is it difficult to apply that to an Igbo man when that very provision had been applied to non-Igbos in recent times, including by the present administration?
Why do you think the Southeast governors are not championing the cause of Nnamdi Kanu's release?
It's for them to answer, and it's quite shameful that is the conclusion that has been drawn since last year, when they declared in July last year that they were going to interface with the president on the issue of Nnamdi Kanu. Nothing has been done. Nnamdi Kanu believes that he has no case to answer, that there are no charges facing him. What about the root fair hearing that was not given to him in Kenya? If Nnamdi Kanu was offered the due process of extradition in Kenya, he may not be here today.
What do you think may be the fears of the federal government if they should allow Nnamdi Kanu to go?
The fear of the Igbo man. The primordial fear of the Igbo man that led to the pogrom, that led to the widespread lie, deadly lie of Igbo coup in 1966, and then that led to the genocide that gave the cover for the 3-year genocidal war. And even after the war, that primordial fear of the Igbo man still persists. We just have to tell ourselves the truth. I'm asking my fellow Nigerians who are not Igbos, what is it about the Igbo man that you fear so much?
There are those who feel that the insurgency in the Southeast was a creation or the making of Nnamdi Kanu. What's your take on that?
Well, a lot of both state and non-state actors latched on to that. Nnamdi Kanu couldn't have been in detention and begin an insurgency or insecurity. When you put a man in detention, he becomes powerless. The protest was not directed against the judiciary to begin with. The protest was directed against the executive decision of the federal government to prosecute Nnamdi Kanu. Protest is a communicative measure taken by citizens in a democracy to express their discontent to their government. If you lose the right of protest to your government, peaceful protest, then what is the essence of democracy? I want 3 victories from Nnamdi Kanu. One before the Abia State High Court, one before the Federal High Court in Umuahia, and one before the Enugu State High Court. The Southeast will continue to struggle politically. Unfortunately, we are politically disadvantaged in this country since the end of the war. So IPOB numbers in the millions of members and followers and sympathizers. So for any discussion of how to move Southeast forward, I think there has to be a consideration that they be brought to the table. And how best can you bring him to the table than bringing their leader, Nnamdi Kanu? P2B has publicly called for a halt to the prosecution of Nnamdi Kanu. So why do they keep looking for him? The box stops at President Tinubu's table. If he does not free Nnamdi Kanu, he can forget the votes of people of Southeast. Unless there's another plan.
In what many have described as a bold and emotional revelation, Aloy Ejimakor, the special counsel to Nnamdi Kanu, has granted an exclusive interview on Symphony TV following his release from detention during the Free Nnamdi Kanu protest in Abuja, a protest that was led by human rights activist Omoyele Sowore. Speaking with a visible dissatisfaction and concern, Ejimakor did not hold back his thoughts on the way the Tinubu-led administration has been handling Nnamdi Kanu's case. He questioned why the government keeps insisting that the matter will be resolved by the courts when it is clear, according to him, that the judiciary alone cannot resolve the case. Ejimakor also drew a powerful comparison to what many Nigerians have come to call the INEC mantra, go to court, the same phrase often heard after election, when candidates accused of vote theft are told to seek justice in a system many already perceive as compromised. He says it gets him thinking, how can the same government fully, aware of the deep political undertones in this case, claim that Kanu's matter will simply be settled in court? It is a kind of blind confidence, Ejimakor said, to believe that Nnamdi Kanu's case will be resolved by the judiciary. Yet, interestingly, he maintained, and he was very clear on this, that technically, Kanu's case can only be resolved in court. But according to him, the Nigerian government is not allowing the court to truly work independently. Ejimakor went further to question, why was Sunday Igboho's case not resolved in court? Why was Mietiala's case not resolved in court? Why was Omoyele Sowore case not, left to be, resolved by the same judiciary? So he asks, why is that same standard so difficult to be applied when it involves an Igbo man? Ejimakor also expressed a huge disappointment in the Southeast governors, accusing them of not genuinely fighting for the release of Nnamdi Kanu. According to him, their efforts have not been largely symbolic, more talk, less action. Ejimakor reaffirmed that Nnamdi Kanu himself believes he has no case to answer, citing multiple legal jurisdictions that support that position. He reminded Nigerians that if Nnamdi Kanu had been offered due proper extradition or even a fair hearing during his arrest in Kenya, he wouldn't have been in Nigeria today facing any trial. He pointed out that what's happening to Nnamdi Kanu isn't just about law, it is about fear. He alleged that the government's hesitation to release him stems from what he called the fear of an Igbo man. He traced that fear all the way back to the events of 1966, to the pogrom, the so-called Igbo coup, and eventually the civil war that led to the loss of countless innocent lives across Igbo land. In his words, it makes me wonder, what is it about the Igbo man that Nigeria fears so much? These questions are very sharp, emotional, and unfiltered, and it has actually left many Nigerians on social media reacting. Some are saying Ejimakor has spoken the hard truth that many have actually avoided for years. Others are accusing him of fueling ethnic sentiments. But one thing is clear, his words have struck nerve, rekindling conversation about justice, fairness, and equality in the Nigerian state. As the debate continues, the call for Nnamdi Kanu's release remains loud and persistent, and voices like Aloy Ejimakor, one of his legal counsels, are also ensuring that question stays on the national table. What is it about the Igbo man that Nigeria truly fear? Let's continue the interview.
One is tempted to ask, why were you arrested and where were you arrested?
They said we disobeyed order of a public officer. By interpretation, it meant there was some court order against the protest that we ostensibly or allegedly disobeyed. The order was never served. Before the protest, the initiator of the protest was Omoyele Sowore. I supported the protest as a Nigerian, as an upstanding Nigerian, as an Igbo man, as somebody who believes in justice. I supported it openly. Okay, I went around with Sowore to drum up support for the protest. It was supposed to be peaceful protest, and we did apply to the police, and it was approved. They went to court to get a court order to stop the protest in its tracks. The judge refused. They pressured, so the judge gave a limited order that the protest could go on, but the judge created a perimeter beyond which the protest cannot go, and it was named, in particular, Shehu Shagari Way, the 3-arm zone that includes the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Aso Rock and National Assembly. That was all. It was a violent arrest, interdiction, forceful, even though the protesters were under their control because they had so many vehicles and so many well-armed police officers. I don't know what they were doing with loaded weapons, and almost each one of them was carrying canisters of tear gas, and they were shooting this thing indiscriminately to the point that it affected some of them.
The perimeter restriction of the court, is it an infringement on your fundamental rights, given the fact that protest is constitutionally guaranteed?
Yes.
So even as the court was limiting it, was it a breach on your own fundamental right?
Now, that order issued from an ex parte application. An ex parte application implies that there's a bigger case coming. So we are going to court and we are going to join issues with them in a substantive setting, in an adversarial setting, where they make their case, we make ours. Then the point that you just made will come in. Since when did Nigerians lose their constitutional right to peaceably assemble, their constitutional right to protest and to free speech? Protest is a communicative measure taken by citizens in a democracy to express their discontent to their government. If you lose the right of protest to your government, peaceful protest, then what is the essence of democracy? That is the question that has to be answered, and it will be answered by the court of law. But right now, we are talking to the court of the public opinion. This is a question I want all Nigerians to ponder. Do you think it is right for your government to arrest you, to subdue you so violently, and subject you to a whole week of imprisonment without trial, just because you came out and you told your government, I am not happy with a particular policy, can you please change it? The protest was not directed against the judiciary to begin with. The judiciary does not initiate prosecutions. The protest was directed against the executive decision of the federal government to prosecute Nnamdi Kanu. Prosecuting someone is different from trying that person. Subjecting you to trial is the duty and it's within the province of the courts. But to trigger that trial, the executive branch takes a step, and that step is called prosecution. So we were out there to tell President Tinubu, not Justice James Omotosho or the Nigerian Federal High Court. No, we were there to tell President Tinubu, the man you have before the courts under trial did nothing wrong. And the manner by which or in which he was brought into the country does not give you the right to subject him to trial. That is all. Pure and simple. That what he was doing, or the enterprise for which you are traducing him and prosecuting him, is an enterprise that is protected under Nigerian law and international law. That enterprise is called self-determination. It is a view, it's a political opinion that may be inconvenient to the government, and that is why the mischief rule in every national law protected it as a political right. If the mischief rule, or people who founded nations didn't think it was wise, they wouldn't have put it there, that you have the right to self-determination.
Some people also wonder, as defense counsel for Nnamdi Kanu, why did you embark on the protest?
Defense counsel to Nnamdi Kanu has not lost his right as a Nigerian. I know the rules of the bar, the rules of subjudice, and so on and so forth. I wasn't in the protest to tell the court on how to make rulings, or how to render judgments, or to express opinion on how the court is conducting the proceedings. I was in the protest to express my views to the government of my country, that your prosecutorial policy, as deployed and levied against my fellow citizen, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, is wrong. Stop it and halt it. It's my right to do so. That's why the fact that I'm a defense counsel. Some of the most far-reaching reforms we enjoy today in terms of our civic rights, we are pioneered through protests led by lawyers like Gani Fawemi and others who are still living a life, like people like Femi Falana. Being a lawyer and even participating in a case does not rob you of having an opinion over that case, a opinion you can express publicly without breaching the zone of subjudice that the court would not want you to go. I was careful to walk that thin line, and I was in my proper zone. I didn't breach anything.
And then one is also tempted to ask, going to public protest, does it imply by any stretch of imagination that you've lost confidence in the judiciary?
No.
In the judicial process?
No. I'm an officer in the Temple of Justice. If I tell you I have lost confidence in the judiciary, then I might as well hang my wig and cap and go to the village and maybe begin to farm.
Maybe some people might need to ask, why is Nnamdi Kanu still being held? If from several reports there is this argument that he has no case to answer, he has not done nothing wrong, why is he still being held? And is there any window of chance for him to be freed?
This case is grounded upon the proscription of IPOB and tagging it a terrorist group. So Nnamdi Kanu got caught up as the leader of IPOB. Do you understand? That's one of the charges. As a matter of fact, 2 other charges were grounded on the basis of his leadership of a proscribed organization. So when I took the case to the Enugu State High Court in 2023, the Enugu State High Court ruled that the manner of proscribing IPOB violated Section 42 of Nigerian Constitution. That is the section of the Nigerian Constitution under Chapter 4 of the Constitution that prohibited discrimination against any Nigerian on the basis of ethnicity. The court mentioned expressly that the proscription of IPOB was a directed executive discrimination against the Igbo ethnic group. And sometime in October 2022, the United Nations Special Rapporteurs, an organ of the United Nations that oversees human rights violations in foreign countries, had also reached the same conclusion. It wasn't by conjecture. They mentioned the Igbo ethnic group. They are the forerunners of what I'm about to say. And what I'm about to say is this. Let it sink in. Nnamdi Kanu is being travailed because he's Igbo. Pure and simple. If he wasn't Igbo, this case would have been over 9-8 years ago. I'm not the first one that said it. A judicial body has said it. Enugu State High Court has said it indirectly. United Nations Special Rapporteurs has said it indirectly and directly to some extent because they mentioned Nnamdi Kanu by name. So let us stop beating around the bush. And this is the reason that really helped galvanize me. As an Igbo man, I shouldn't have a trembling knee. I'm not an Igbo man with a trembling knee. So when you step on the rights of an upstanding Igbo man and it gets my attention, I'll fight for him. If I don't do it in the courts, I do it on the streets. And I fight peaceably, but I'll fight strongly and vigorously. Because it's one for all for one. If I let that one sit out, if I sit it out, one day it may be my turn. I also fight for other Nigerians. But you gotta be Igbo first before you become a Nigerian. So I cannot be in denial that all is well with Igbo man in Nigeria. And Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is the poster boy for that.
How soon are we expecting freedom for him? Any hope?
It lies with President Tinubu. I hope someday, somewhere, a journalist will ask him that question. But I'll tell you what, when I see statements issuing from the villa, not in particular from Tinubu himself, from President Tinubu himself, but from his underlings, that this matter should be resolved by the courts, it gets me thinking, is someone somewhere contriving some predetermined results from the courts? What is informing this blind confidence about the matter of Nnamdi Kanu should be resolved by the courts? It begins to sound to me like someone who stole your election, and before you open your mouth, INEC tells you go to court, like a mantra. You know, it's suspicious. Why wasn't Igbo's case resolved in the courts? Why wasn't the chairman Omiet Allah's case resolved by the courts? Why wasn't Shomore's case resolved by the courts? So when they begin to insist that the matter of Nnamdi Kanu should be resolved by the courts, it takes me back to 1963, when they were also saying the same thing about the case of Obafemi Awolowo and Anthony Inahoro, charged with treasonable felony. And they were facing a trial in which they had the option of taking summary trial or the other, but they pushed them into summary trial and convicted them with a bat of an eyelid. It was a political trial. They were also saying it should be resolved by the courts. So his conviction was contrived. We learned later from Justice Cho that his hands were tied. So it makes you suspicious when the executive branch that is prosecuting you leaves no room for discussion other than telling you it should be resolved by the courts. Otherwise, why do we have that provision in the Nigerian Constitution that the Attorney General can discontinue a criminal prosecution? Why is it difficult to apply that to an Igbo man when that very provision had been applied to non-Igbos in recent times, including by the present administration?
The issue of Nnamdi Kanu, we heard sacking all his lawyers or firing all his lawyers, and including very senior advocate of Nigeria, Kanu Agabi, and other counsels from defending him. What are the implications and what is left for him?
Well, you know, using the word firing is not, I would say, debriefing and disengaging. It's a strategic move by him. He's a well-educated man, and he has his mind intact. He's fully aware of what he's doing. That's all I can say to that.
Why do you think the Southeast governors are not championing the cause of Nnamdi Kanu's release?
It's for them to answer, and it's quite shameful that is the conclusion that has been drawn since last year, when they declared in July last year that they were going to interface with the president on the issue of Nnamdi Kanu. Nothing has been done. So they just have to explain to Igbo why they have not taken any step visible, seen. I hear a lot of things that some of them have taken some covert steps, but I didn't see that, but I don't have any reason to doubt them. But I think what needs to be done and what needs to be convincing is something you do in the open. If Southeast governors empanel themselves or convene themselves one day and say, this weekend we are going to Villa to discuss with President Tinubu on the question of this issue of Nnamdi Kanu, I think, you know, Igbo will be very proud of them. That hasn't happened, and to me, it's not something that to be proud of.
Looking at the strategic moves you talked about right now, what is the current status of his defense?
Nnamdi Kanu believes that he has no case to answer, that there are no charges facing him. Listen, let me tell you a story. You know, you're not lawyers, but you know that once a law is repealed, it's repealed. Can you believe that the Terrorism Prevention and Amendment Act 2013 was repealed in July 2022? Nnamdi Kanu is still being charged under that old law, which was replaced in July 2022 by Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022. We're in 2025, and you're still trying him on an old law. Let's not talk about extraordinary rendition, because somebody might say, oh, the Supreme Court said, okay, he was rendition, but he's still subject to trial. But there are other issues dancing around that. What about the root fair hearing that was not given to him in Kenya? If Nnamdi Kanu was offered the due process of extradition in Kenya, he may not be here today, because there are a lot of defenses to extradition within the extradition laws of any nation, including Kenya. So there are just so many issues, and you know, he was discharged in October 2023. Okay, now this case took like a year and a half to get reinstated, and while that was going on, in fact, even at the Court of Appeal, the law was repealed. So what is this facing before the Nigerian judiciary now? Charges based on old law. It's for the courts to decide, but these are one of the defenses in chief or cases in chief that are emanating from him that are a challenge to his prosecution or his trial.
The judge handling the case has said he should consult very experienced lawyers to explain to him the implication of standing trial for himself, or I don't know that, or what it implies. So what is your own advice on this matter as it is now, representing himself or going to seek for more serious advice?
He has legal consultants.
So what is he likely to do now?
Nnamdi Kanu will not be the first person to defend himself in a criminal trial. I can give you several examples. Martin Luther King did it in America. At some point, in Gandhi, the father of non-violent resistance, did it in South Africa before he escaped to India. I think Mandela tried to defend himself too at some point. And in 1963, we go back to Awolowo again. Awolowo defended himself. He was assisted by some lawyers, including one from England, who was denied entry into Nigeria, but eventually he was granted entry. So Awolowo defended himself. So a lot of defendants, people who were subjected to criminal trial, have defended themselves in history. Nnamdi Kanu will not be the first. But that does not obviate the fact that he does not need the advice of experts. If he feels he does on any question of law, I think he's wise enough, smart enough to go for it.
What do you think may be the fears of the federal government if they should allow Nnamdi Kanu to go?
The fear of the Igbo man. The primordial fear of the Igbo man that led to the pogrom, that led to the widespread lie, deadly lie of Igbo coup in 1966, and then that led to the genocide that gave the cover for the 3-year genocidal war. And even after the war, that primordial fear of the Igbo man still persists. We just have to tell ourselves the truth. The truth. I'm asking my fellow Nigerians who are not Igbos, what is it about the Igbo man that you fear so much? That when we are even in power, when you are even holding the levers of the presidency, you still fear the Igbo man enough, sufficiently enough to put him in chains, to try to put him in jail and lock him away and throw away the key. Do you believe that to be the solution to your fears? Or do you take the other part, the other part of brotherhood and compatriot spirit, and embrace the Igbo man with all his good, the bad, and ugly, just as a human being that he is? We possess good qualities and bad qualities, all of us. Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Nupe, whatever, white, black. So this singling out of an Igbo man in Nigeria as a separate entity to be treated in a certain discriminatory way, I've cited court rulings in that regard, including the one by the United Nations. So I'm not inventing anything. That thing has to go, or Nigeria will continue to have certain problems that it shouldn't have.
What is the current state of his health? Because we know at the point...
of course, he's not feeling well.
Judiciary set up a panel, and the panel said that they gave him a clean bill of health.
Well, that one, the jury is still out on that. There's a question as to whether the Nigerian Medical Association is the right body to certify him as being fit for trial or not. It's a legal question, and I think it's going to become judicial very soon, sooner than later. There's also a question as to whether they actually examined him after 26 September, when the judge made the order. Nigerian Medical Association never examined Nnamdi Kanu, to my knowledge. I was managing his health as a lawyer, writing letters, staying with him, being present when he was with doctors. After 26 September, Nigerian Medical Association never examined Nnamdi Kanu physically.
If another free Nnamdi Kanu protest is called today, will you make yourself available?
I'll be the first to step forward. I lead from the front.
There are those who feel that the insurgency in the southeast was a creation or the making of Nnamdi Kanu. What's your take on that?
Well, a lot of both state and non-state actors latched on to that. Nnamdi Kanu couldn't have been in detention and begin an insurgency or insecurity. When you put a man in detention, he becomes powerless. So, but nature abhors a vacuum. I do believe, and I acknowledge the reality, that state and non-state actors stepped in and contrived this insecurity to rubbish Igbo land, to make Igbo land unsafe, to blame us for misfortunes they brought to us. Do you understand? You beat a child, you don't want him to cry. He cries, you beat him again. So, it's so wrong. But if everybody believes that Nnamdi Kanu's prolonged detention is directly related to the insecurity in the southeast, why is the government not letting him go just to test the waters? Everybody is saying so. So you release him.
Do you think that releasing him can guarantee peace in the southeast or end insurgency in the southeast?
He's an upstanding citizen of the southeast, and he has legions of followers in the millions. I think his voice will count. Even my small self, and you, Victor, if you rise today in a podium in Enugu and Oka and say, my people, please stop killing one another, stop kidnapping, those criminals are amongst you, please stop. Maybe one person will listen to you. I think thousands will listen to Nnamdi Kanu, just like they will listen to others. But as it is now, what voice in Igbo land do you think is stronger than he? He has a very strong voice. He has a way of, making things happen. He's a man of charisma and great influence. Like one of South leaders was saying that all South leaders need to come to the table to talk about how to advance Southeast and end insecurity. Why would that discussion exclude the man of Nnamdi Kanu? The fish rots from the head. And if you want to kill a hydra, you chop the head off. That's what they are trying to do to us. But God forbid, it won't happen.
There are those who have also dismissed the insinuation that releasing him will guarantee peace or return peace to the southeast.
Okay, is that the reason now to hold him forever? That shouldn't be the reason to hold him forever. What about for his own sake? For the sake of justice? He deserves justice. Just for himself. We shouldn't be using him as a bait or as a pawn in the chessboard of insecurity. In Southeast, it's not fair. Okay, we can answer the question and say, yes, the two are correlated, but it stops there. The next question is, what about the justice of the case? Prosecuting Nnamdi Kanu is unjust in the first place. Renditioning him is unjust in the first place. Addressing those things are personal to him.
In a dramatic follow-up to the last month's Free Nnamdi Kanu's protest in Abuja, Barrister Aloy Ejimakor, who was among those arrested and later released, sat down for the explosive interview on Symphone Television. He spoke with visible anger and legal precision, and his words cut across law, politics, and memory. He accused the Tinubu's administration of pretending the Nnamdi Kanu's matter would be resolved by the court, even while he says the same government knows fully well that the matter can never be resolved legally. According to Ejimakor, the government keeps telling Nigerians the matter will be resolved by the court. He called that response a hollow mantra, the same refrain used to, placate citizens after disputed elections. Go to court. He called it a blind confidence to believe the judiciary will fix. That phrase, go to court, has become a political dodge in Nigeria. When government institutions are perceived as politicized, telling citizens to litigate feels like, passing the buck. Politically, Ejimakor is weaponizing narrative. If the executive publicly insists on judicial resolution, while simultaneously taking steps that weaken judicial independence or intimidate litigants, the public will reasonably read that as a hypocrisy or even bad faith. His statement is calculated to shift public focus from legal technicalities to political accountability. Legally, Ejimakor is walking a narrow lane. He is right that court processes are the formal venue for resolution, but he is alleging that the practical ability of the court to impartially adjudicate in this specific matter is compromised. If true, that allegation is serious, it raises questions about due process, interferences, and whether remedies like recusal, transfer of venue, or international oversight should be sought. From a legal strategy perspective, his claim invites a deliberate push for documentary and procedural transparency on public hearings and strict adherences to extradition protocol, especially given Kanu's international movement. The comparison, why are Igbos treated differently, with what Ejimakor asked, why weren't Sunday Igbo, Maitiala or Mole Shore allowed to their matters play out in the court the same way? Why is an Igbo man singled out? He frames this as a selective justice or even ethnic bias that, harkens back to historical traumas. This is to me where law meets identity politics. Ejimakor is intentionally invoking a pattern. If certain actors are treated, leniently or allowed judicial breathing room while Kanu's movement is criminalized, the conclusion many in the Southeast would draw is that the state's response is discriminatory. Politically, that is combustible. It revives grievances about marginalization and differential enforcement. For the Tinubu's administration, the risk is actually obvious. Perceived double standard deepen distrust and could depress or mobilize votes in the Southeast, which Aloy Ejimakor explicitly warned about. So in legal response, to prove selective enforcement, you need a documentary trail, arrest records, charge sheets, treatment by security agencies, bail outcomes and timelines. Ejimakor's rhetorical question is powerful, but legally, it requires comparative case-by-case analysis. If a pattern is established, it strengthens constitutional claims of discrimination and could fuel petitions to higher courts or even regional bodies. That is why his rhetorical comparison is both political theater and the outcome of legal strategy. talking about the Southeast governors not genuinely fighting for Nnamdi Kanu's release. He accused the Southeast governors of not really fighting for the release of Nnamdi Kanu, suggesting their public statements are symbolic rather than substantive. Ejimakor knows which legal arguments can be amplified by political pressure. This undermines the passive unity of the Southeast and the open questions about political calculations by those governors. Politicians can, exert influence. Lawyers need evidence. If governors purportedly fail to act, Ejimakor's claim could be used to embarrass them into more forceful interventions, letters to, presidency or even public advocacy. But the legal system will require procedural move. Ejimakor also argued the jurisdictional question of Nnamdi Kanu's trial. He says, had Nnamdi Kanu been accorded proper extradition process or a fair hearing in Kenya, he wouldn't be in Nigeria facing any trial, implying procedural irregularities in how Nnamdi Kanu was actually extradited. And politically speaking, this line pushes an international law angle that dramatically reframes the debate. If Kanu's return involved irregular extradition or rendition-like conduct, the story is no longer purely domestic law, but touches on bilateral conduct and international norms. So asserting an irregular rendition increases cause for external scrutiny and could embarrass the federal government internationally. Legally, this is a major legal lever. Allegations of unlawful rendition or extradition be raised immediately in court with supporting evidence. If lawyers can show procedural breach under international extradition law or Kenyan law, that could invalidate part of the prosecution or trigger demands for remedy, possibly even repatriation through lawful channels or stay of proceedings. Ejimakor's point is legally actionable. He cited about the fear of Igbo man, the 1966, the pogrom, the civil war. What Ejimakor invoked, he tied the government alleged reluctance to releasing Nnamdi Kanu to historic fear, the traumatic memory of 1966, the pogroms, the alleged coup, and the civil war that followed. He asked Nigerians bluntly, what is it about the Igbo man that they fear so much? Politically, this is raw and intentional. By dragging history into current legal debate, Ejimakor is reframing the matter as structural and existential, not just legal. Politically, it forces the national conversation onto identity, historical injustice, and emotional memory that escalates stakes. It's not only about Kanu, it's about collective memory and perceived threats to national cohesion. For the center, responding badly risk being painted as repeating historical exclusions. So that is to say, while history provides context, court adjudicates evidence and law. Invoking 1966 is powerful in the court of public opinion, but less so in statutory interpretation. However, it can inform proportionality arguments in constitutional litigation. For example, you talk about the claims that the action against Kanu was discriminatory or disproportionately aimed at a particular ethnic group. The legal team could pair historic context with contemporary evidence to craft constitutional and human rights claims. Ejimakor narrated his ordeal, his account of being arrested at the protest and Sowere's role. What Ejimakor narrated, he described, being brutalized by the police during the Free Nnamdi Kanu's protest, the canisters unleashed on them, talking about the recounting arrest, detention at the Kuje prison, and legal limbo that followed. He also referenced the briefing legal teams and Kanu's belief that he has no case to answer. To me, protest repression and treatment of prominent activists when a government uses force against peaceful demonstrators, it signals intolerance for dissent, which can galvanize opposition coalitions and civil society. Ejimakor's testimony strengthens the narrative of a shrinking civic space and executive overreach, and this shouldn't be swept under carpet. Legally, this can form the basis for wrong arrest suits, injunctions, restraining future police action, and application for injunctive relief in human rights reforms. Ejimakor's first-hand account is both evidence and impetus for such actions. No Southeast vote for Tinubu if Nnamdi Kanu isn't freed. Ejimakor clearly stated that Tinubu cannot count on Southeast votes unless Kanu is freed, unless there is another plan. Politically speaking, that's a direct political pressure tactics, tying legal outcomes to electoral consequences. It's actually classic political bargaining. It makes the cost of continuation visible for the administration. It's a warning about electoral arithmetic for the Southeast, symbolizing message. This converts a legal case into a tangible electoral variable, increasing the political cost of ignoring the issue. Legally, blending legal pressure with electoral threat is effective in public debate, but irrelevant to judicial reasoning. Courts cannot and should not decide based on political bargaining. For lawyers like Ejimakor, however, the political lever complements litigations. It's actually creating leverage outside the courtroom that may produce more favorable procedural handling or concession. This is my overall assessment in all of this. Firstly, Ejimakor understands narrative power. he connects selective enforcement, historic grievance, and electoral leverage into a single frame. This is not merely a case, it is a crisis of legitimacy. That frame resonates in the Southeast and among right activists. The administration must decide whether to, de-escalate by demonstrating transparent legal process, or to double down, which risk further alienation and protest. Secondly, some of Ejimakor's claims are strongly actionable. The alleged unlawful extradition, police brutality, selective enforcement, that is discrimination, and it can actually hold water to this. And this, if we're prepared legally, can stand a chance in their ongoing legal defense of Nnamdi Kanu. So if these are substantiated, those facts can underpin constitution, human rights, and international law challenges. And I have this to say, if the state continues to insist the court will decide while appearing to interfere with or ignore the due process, it has the opposition a punted narrative. The voice of justice may be silenced for a moment, but truth has a way of finding its echo. Aloy Ejimakor's words reminds us that the struggle for equity in Nigeria is far from over, and the question still stands: what is it about Igbo man that this nation fears so much? From the courtroom to the corridors of power, one thing remains clear: justice cannot thrive where selective silence rules. Don't forget to like, leave your comments, share, and of course smash the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you would always be the first to get our in-depth analysis of trends and political stories. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay focused, stay informed, and stay objective.